Welcome to the Startups Leader Show, where we learn lessons from startup founders and executives. I am your host, Lisa Dreher, and I'm really excited to introduce our guest for today, Rob Tiffany. He is the Chief Product Officer at Red Bison. Welcome to the show, Rob.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much for making time for this. Maybe we can
Absolutely.
start by having you give just a little bit of background on yourself and Red Bison.
Sure. Let's see. Let's see if we can just do the whole career in like 10 seconds. I don't know. Driving submarines. First thing out of the military was a startup, which was the forerunner to IoT in the mid 90s. .com stuff like so many people did. Other startups, built device management company, and then spent most of my career at Microsoft. And so first half of Microsoft, if anybody remembers Windows Mobile or Windows Phone, I was part of building that. Second half was building Azure. And so that was a great experience building Azure Cloud, and then specifically on the Azure IoT team for people who are into IoT. Got recruited out of there by Hitachi to go build an industrial IoT digital twin platform, and we did that called Lumada. So I spent a lot of time in Japanese factories, which was great. And then went to Ericsson, and I was the head of IoT strategy at Ericsson. Ericsson is one of the companies that makes cellular equipment. They're a Swedish company. So I spent a lot of time flying to Sweden every month. And so that was pretty crazy. And so now here I am at Red Bison, which is primarily a networking company, kind of focused on commercial real estate. We can dive into that.
Excellent. Wow. Amazing. Amazing career. It's crazy. I can put so many years just into a
I
minute or
know.
so.
I know. It's weird. I must have started my career when I was 12 years old or something like that.
Definitely. Definitely.
Yeah,
Well, so tell us a little bit more about what Red Bison is doing,
yeah.
and I guess why do we need to connect buildings?
Right. So yeah, I would say Red Bison came together. There's a lot of networking experts in this company. It was actually started by Admiral Bill Owens. Not that you know who he used to be, the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he was actually a submarine captain. So he and I have a lot of that in common, that submarine life. In fact, a lot of ex-Navy, ex-military veterans make up the company, and after he was out of the Pentagon, he ran Nortel Networks and he ran CenturyLink, which is Lumen now, way back when. So a lot of networking in the blood there, as you can imagine. And so I would say it was a combination of networks to commercial real estate, initially, and it started back in 2019. And the basics of it is, hey, let's bring a 10 gigabit circuit to commercial office buildings or multifamily, things like that. I hear ads on the radio all about 10G, which I know confuses people who think they know what 5G is for wireless. But when you hear these ads using 10G for marketing, it just means a 10 gigabit kind of circuit of the internet coming into the building. So to do that, then wire up the whole building. There's fiber, there's Ethernet going up there's all these weird little closets. They're like little mini data centers in a building. And maybe you've seen them. Sometimes you'll see when you're walking in a hallway and a floor, you see maybe say a telecom room or something. There's a bigger one on the bottom floor, and then there's smaller ones on every floor going up, like a skyscraper, for instance. And
Uh-huh.
and in those rooms, there's wires going from the bottom all the way to the top of the building, and then they break out on each floor, as you might imagine, and they turn into the Ethernet that's in the walls that you see in jacks there, as well as connecting like Wi-Fi access points throughout buildings. That's pretty common. So Red Bison does that as well. Actually, part of the whole military thing, we actually work with a company called Semper Fi, which is run by disabled veterans, and they actually do help us do a lot of that deployment and wiring up these buildings for all that stuff to bring. So it's networking to the building, throughout the building, Wi-Fi, things like that. And they brought me on because I had experience in IoT and edge computing, and a bunch of crazy stuff like that. And I just remember having an initial discussion and going to the building, and it was like, they go, well, we own the network in these buildings, whether it's a multifamily condo or high-rise office building. We own, run, and control the network throughout the whole building. And then on each of these floors in these little rooms, we get server rack space to put compute there. Rob, is there anything we could do with that? And I'm like, wow, that sounds like edge computing to me. And it sounds like something's just been given to you on a silver platter to take advantage of. And so you can imagine managing networks, putting IoT devices throughout the building. You think of a lot of the smart building use cases, smart sensors like occupancy. We've all seen the basic ones like occupancy, like you're in the conference room and the lights turn on or off automatically based on if somebody's in there. And sometimes you're in there and it goes dark and you have to wave your hand.
Yeah.
Stuff like throttling back the HVAC system, either hotter or colder, depending on the season, to save energy. So a lot of energy management stuff, a whole lot of things like that. And, it's funny, I've seen other IoT companies go after, a lot of people go after smart cities, and smart buildings are a big part of smart cities. Actually, they're the biggest part of smart cities. And so they go after those use cases, but a lot of times they don't have success. And I always wondered why, because some of the use cases are great, a lot of value to the customers. It turns out it's because they don't control the network. They don't control anything in the building. And they just say, hey, let us in. We're going to put all these sensors everywhere and magic is going to happen. And a lot of times it doesn't work out for them, even if they have great technology, because I've certainly seen that in my background doing IoT with other companies. And so I would say owning the network in these buildings is like a Trojan horse, and having servers. And so we can put edge compute, have distributed kind of edge IoT things, talking to devices to control systems in the buildings. Some big buildings have building management systems from companies like Siemens or Honeywell or Johnson Controls. And those guys have great technology as well. And it's a patchwork quilt out there, no doubt about it. And there's lots of buildings, if you're under a certain number of square footage, they probably don't have anything,
Right.
So yeah, it's an interesting space. And so yeah, the company does great just doing the networks, to be honest with you. It turns out. And so when you think of what's the value prop of that, aside from the people in the building expect fast internet, right, to just do their jobs, right? And so one of the early value props, just bringing in that fast, either a 1 or 10 gigabit circuit, is, it turns out, here, let me back up a little bit. If you're a tenant going into a building, let's say you're going in an office building, and you move into your space on whatever floor of a building, you've got to call up AT&T or Lumen or whoever and say, hey, I need to provision internet for my office space, and I want Wi-Fi, and I want all this stuff. And they'll say, okay, we'll be out there. Especially these days, things are a lot slower, as you might have noticed in the world these days, the supply chain, and then not enough people working. I don't know what's going on, but they might say, okay, in a few months, we'll get out there and do that. And so we kind of flip that on its head, and we go target the building owners. And so we actually do a deal with the owner operator of the building, and they pay for and bring in that circuit. And then we have software that I got to build that's like, think of it as an internal portal. So imagine you're that tenant who moved in, and so instead of you having to pick up the phone and try to provision whatever, you actually go to an internal website, like go into Amazon and e-commerce point and clicking, say, yes, I want a 1 gigabit Ethernet into my office, and I want Wi-Fi 6 access points. And you do that, and then we provision that for you, like within a couple of days. And so kind of flips out on its head. It's a part of, no doubt, part of it's a convenience thing, but it's, and then you can imagine right now, because you have to be really open and honest about the current economic situation. You probably heard that commercial buildings, office buildings, Many of them across the country are below 50% occupancy. And this has everything to do with COVID pandemic. Everybody went home. Everyone's working from home. COVID's kind of over, not for you. And and people and the companies are telling their employees, all right, we need you to come back to the office. And a lot of employees are saying, nah, I'm not coming back. And you're seeing that everywhere. Yeah. And then some people are like, well, how about a hybrid? How about 3 days a week? Let's just get you Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. There's a lot of weirdness going on right there. And that has contributed to these vacancy rates, high vacancy rates actually in these buildings. But of course, it's not like they're just empty buildings that haven't been sold. There's companies that are on the hook who are paying monthly payments for this real estate, and their employees are not using it because they'd rather be at home. Right. Or they said, and a lot of people maybe felt like they had an epiphany during the pandemic. It's like, why was I spending so much of my life in traffic every day, going downtown or whatever? And so part of it is we're helping these building owners and these companies. What can you do to attract the employees to come back? Now, obviously, the biggest thing will, of course, be their employer. But a lot of people have got pretty good setups,
right?
At home,
Sure.
Everybody's on Zoom and Teams and whatever, and they've got their fast internet, and they they have all their amenities. So we're helping to try to bring some of that to these buildings, at least on the network side. We help building owners save money. It turns out you've got all these systems in buildings, like there's the building management system, the HVAC, there's lighting, there's elevators, there's fire, a whole bunch of different systems. And guess what? Every one of those systems has their own network, as it turns out, which costs a lot of money. So part of what we do is we'll just bring in the big pipe, and then you get rid of all those extra networks and save money and things like that. Another aspect is safety. It's not enough to have a smart space. You need to have a safe space, a safe building, because we have certainly seen an uptick in crime around the country and in urban areas. It depends on the city. They're not all the same. And so, we're using some of that edge computing to do local, video surveillance. You're seeing a lot more companies want that, more active video surveillance. And if you use edge computing locally, it's actually cheaper for them. Like normally you'd have all these cameras, these 1080p or whatever, 4K cameras recording all the time. And they would stream that recording to the cloud, maybe to an AWS S3 bucket or something. And so there's a cost to that. There's a cost of that bandwidth, and this security issues of just being out over the open internet. And so, as you can imagine, since we have this super fast network and we have edge computing inside the building, so we provide that like as a service, like security cameras as a service kind of thing, and just store all those video streams, just get stored locally on those edge servers inside the building. Yeah. And so it's faster, it's closer, and you can do it a lot more cheaply. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling here. You might have some other questions.
No, that's amazing. There are so many benefits, it sounds like. And wow, just having that centralized network, what a difference. Both, it sounds like, for the owners as well as the occupants. It makes it easier for them to get the services that they need. So fantastic. Absolutely. Where do you see this going for the longer term future? Are there big aspirations as to additional capabilities and things like that?
Is this the part where I tell you that we have some kind of AI thing?
Probably.
If we were talking 5 years ago, I would probably say something about blockchain or something like that. But no. I'd say big aspirational stuff when I think about the broader plans. So you can imagine. So I remember having experience building the Azure cloud, for instance, and there's lots of geeky stuff that people don't necessarily understand, things called availability zones, where basically you have your servers in multiple different parts of a data center, an Azure data center, or it could be AWS or Google, and then different data centers, different clouds in different places. And people do that so that If something goes down in this part of the data center, it doesn't go down here or in other cities. So working on, this idea of kind of this distributed edge cloud. And so imagine on the first floor of the office building with the big room, you can imagine that being your primary thing, where maybe you're hosting cloud services. So in addition to the services we will provide, like we're using our compute there to provide like IoT platforms at the edge to monitor systems like that and provide services like video cameras and others. But it's also a place, just like you're accustomed to with AWS or Azure, that you run your own business workloads. Like I need to spin up a virtual machine and I need this much storage and I'm going to run this kind of compute and stuff like that. And so that's typical stuff you would do with the cloud. Well, we can do that in this edge cloud thing. And then availability zones would be different nodes in different parts of the building, where it's replicating that data to different nodes in the building to spread out that load. And also, fault tolerance if something goes down somewhere. And then likewise, you can imagine that breaking that out, we've got these high-speed networks outside the buildings and having edge compute in other buildings that we manage. And so replicating, like geo-replication, it could be another building in the same city, or it could be somewhere across the country. And so I know it sounds like I'm trying to attack the hyperscale clouds and go after them with the edge. Maybe. I don't know. You wanted a big aspirational thing. Here it is.
Yeah.
And so that's, there's other edge players who are they're not doing exactly that, but like Vapor.io is putting shipping containers in different parts of cities and packing them full of servers and stuff like that. So imagine us taking advantage of maybe this high vacancy rate, and how do we make these buildings, like the value of a skyscraper, which a lot of people don't realize, is actually the tenants in the skyscraper, the people. A lot of people think that just like your house, you think, well, it has an intrinsic value. But when it comes to commercial real estate, like it could be a skyscraper in New York City, if there's nobody in it, the skyscraper is worth $0.
Yeah.
Which sounds crazy, but it's the way it is. We want to give these buildings intrinsic value beyond having tenants. Right. And so you can imagine, we do rev sharing with the networks, with the tenants. We'll do rev sharing, with this compute and edge cloud kind of stuff. And so it's just probably a different way of thinking of this edge cloud thing, and giving buildings another reason to make money besides it's full of tenants. Gosh, you're hearing stories in some places. I've heard stories in New York City where people are working to convert commercial office buildings into multifamily apartments or condos. Because, it's almost like, well, people still need to live somewhere, but they may not be going to the office. And so it's like, okay, let's point at all these half-empty buildings. Could we turn them into something else?
Right.
Yeah. And so, that's a thing. And so we're doing multifamily, and that's a different dynamic, providing networks to people in their apartments or condos, and then they want their mesh Wi-Fi and then other layered services, right? Maybe they want a Nest thermostat. Maybe they want a Ring doorbell. Maybe, all that kind of stuff like that. All that smart home stuff going into smart multifamily. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting things. So, it's still early days. And so we're building out some of that infrastructure little by little. We've got the IoT technology, because luckily I've built that a few times at big companies, so I kind of know how to do that stuff. And so, but also being really thoughtful about providing direct services to customers or building owners, the use cases that actually make a difference, that can make them money or save them money. I know we spent a lot of time in IoT doing lots of fun science experiments just because we could do them, or it's like, yeah, wouldn't this be cool if, and we do it. And, in the end, the customer wants to save money, make money, reduce risk, whatever. There's maybe 3 or 4 things when you get right down to it, and so it's like, if you're not doing one of those, then especially now when you think about economics or the economy in general, the mindset of a potential customer changes. When the times are great and money's cheap and it's flowing and everything's awesome, they will do all kinds of fun, crazy projects. But when things are a little different like this, the nice to haves are not good anymore, and it's got to be must have things. And so when we talk to these building owners or whatever, their first thing is, I want you to tell me how I can save money. That's usually the first thing I hear. And so, and if you're not going to show me something that's going to save me money, and you can't show up with something that's super expensive, and then 5 years from now I'll make my money back, that doesn't fly either. And so they want quick return. They want to start saving money right away, or if you can show them some way to make new revenues. And so I've certainly learned my lessons, lots of battle scars from over the years around that. And so I don't waste time with the little fun, nice to have, there's 1,000 nice to have IoT things that don't, that make life better or more convenient, but they don't necessarily save you money or whatever. And so really narrowly focusing on those kind of use cases. So yeah, and then buildings can start playing a role in providing, when you say, why do we need connected buildings? What about outside the building? The notion that you could start the building, how could it become a beacon to the surrounding neighborhood? Providing, internet or, availability to the rest of different neighborhoods. How can this building be this place that helps lift people up in surrounding areas? And so you'll have retailers, you'll have shops, you'll have maybe people living or whatever. And so there are scenarios, heck, we even do microwave repeaters and beam stuff around as far as, and so we're certainly looking at that notion of providing community networks, and Wi-Fi and other things like that, or private cellular to surrounding neighborhoods to help all those folks, and the same, I'm running a retail shop and maybe I'm doing a point of sale selling whatever, cupcakes, I don't know. Right. And, everybody needs some little compute thing, and they may have it on their own. A lot of people, I know everybody assumes everybody just went to the cloud and there's no IT departments running things anymore, but that's not the case, as it turns out. And so we can provide compute and network services to the nearby folks in the neighborhood, close by the buildings, to handle those light things, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see how all this plays out, but it's been a lot of fun.
Amazing. Okay, so if somebody wanted to learn more about Red Bison, what should they do?
They can go on the LinkedIn machine to Red Bison, Red Bison Networks, redbison.com. There's redbisonnetworks.com, a lot of redirecting. We're still getting that stuff going. We're still a small team, and so how the cobbler's children have no shoes, that kind of thing. And so, but when you're a startup, you have a lot of people wearing a lot of hats.
Yes.
And it's not like, because my career, I've been at giant companies and I've been at startups. Startups are always more exciting. They're also more nerve-wracking and stressful in some ways, right?
Sure.
And startups are not a good place for people who need a lot of structure at their job. And you have to start up as a place where you have to be willing to just jump in and do other jobs, maybe 10 other jobs, where you always hear about people wearing lots of hats,
Indeed.
I'm leading product management, but I'm writing a lot of code right now. And it is what it is. Everybody's got to pull their weight and to make it a success, right? That's like Mark Andreessen, the success of a startup. It's not like, if you don't do it, it probably won't get done, whatever that is. You can't say, oh, someone over in this other department is going to handle that, or someone that doesn't exist in a startup.
Yeah. You can't say it's not my job too much.
Right. I'm so glad you said that. My last commanding officer, captain on my last submarine, the USS Alaska, that's how I was up here in the Pacific Northwest, actually, the Trident base. I remember when he came on board and he did a big talk to everybody, all the people in the submarine, and he was kind of giving a speech, introduction speech, and that was one of the things he said. His number one pet peeve is
Mm,
anyone who says that's not my job.
yes.
Uh, and so it's like, yeah, it stuck with me.
That's a
It's a,
good note to end on. Oh my gosh. Well, gosh, Rob, wow, what an exciting thing that you're working on. I can't wait to see as our buildings become more and more connected. All of the very valuable, cost saving, and maybe a few cool things that will be coming down the pike.
Absolutely. It's fun stuff. No doubt about
Yeah.
it.
Thanks for
Yeah.
being here today. And hopefully, we can have you on again soon and you can tell us about all the advancements.
Sounds great. Thanks so much for having me.
Sure thing.